So I think a pathologist is likely to leave their light microscope and adopt a whole slide imaging device if they can be shown how that instrument can enable them and their job. So there are lots of benefits, and I don't think pathologists realize all those benefits. There are benefits to being mobile, there are benefits to the added information and image analysis that can be performed on an image, the computer-aided diagnoses, and just basically, if you can show a pathologist that it's far easier to move an image around than it is to move a patient or actually themselves move around, I think they will be willing to surrender their microscope and adopt digital pathology. So I think one of the barriers currently now is the standardization of digital pathology, and we're talking about standardization of the whole imaging process from image acquisition through to image viewing. And if people promote standardization and the vendors participate in that standardization and interoperability, will go a long way for better widespread adoption of digital pathology. So we're kind of at a crossroads where vendors are producing different instruments and different software and different file formats. So we haven't reached a point where the vendors and the information systems are all compatible, and these are plug-and-play systems that are easy for laboratories to adopt. I think when we reach that interoperability where everyone is compliant, will digital pathology be really leveraged and fully available for pathologists and actually then benefit their patients. So I think when pathologists are thinking about bringing these devices and digital images into their clinical lab environments, it's very important that they do this in a proper manner, and that requires proper validation of these instruments. And there are now guidelines that are produced by the CAP, the College of American Pathologists, that provide practical recommendations for pathologists to validate these systems so that they can be safe in their labs and therefore safe for patient diagnoses. So compared to Europe, in the USA at present, the FDA have restricted the use of digital pathology for making primary diagnoses, and that has restricted the use of digital pathology in general, but it's also created different kind of uses for digital pathology, such as secondary consultation, education, proficiency testing. But what I have witnessed is a change in the FDA, in that there is a more positive movement towards ultimately helping vendors and facilitating them to perform the trials necessary so that they can render claims so that digital pathology in the USA can soon be used for primary diagnoses. So in my opinion, I think the adoption of digital pathology in healthcare is driven by both cost savings and also patient outcomes. So cost savings, ultimately, it will be shown through productivity and better quality that there will be a return on investment for purchasing and using digital pathology systems. And on the other end, by facilitating sharing of cases so that the right case is seen by the right pathologist with expertise in that area, particularly helping underserved areas, that patient outcomes will be improved through better accuracy and more reproducible diagnoses, with the aided computer-assisted tools that will be available with digital pathology. Happy to be at the Digital Pathology Congress in London, and I feel that the current agenda addresses all aspects of digital pathology, tackling past issues, current issues, and addressing future trends. So I think it's a wonderful set of speakers and a great audience, really engaged in the field and helping promote the future of digital pathology.
Okay, the stage of digital pathology just in the moment is, I would say, in a little bit complicated situation. Because on one hand, we have the clear advantages of digital pathology, and it is also clear that digital pathology will make a revolution in pathology. But nevertheless, we have a lot of solutions which are not on a level so that you can put them in like industrial parts. So sometimes pathologists are a little bit frustrated about the real solutions which we get in their hands, especially in the context of clinical pathology. The situation is much better if you go to research or if you go to education solutions. In education, the systems are quite simple and run very well. The loss of particles during the scan of a scanning system is sometimes very critical, because one particle in a total slide may be a tumor particle. And if you lose, especially this particle, this may be quite critical for the patient. That's why it should be absolutely sure that you don't lose any particles during scan. I think there are possible solutions, and I know already that there are some solutions coming to the market. We personally at the Charité developed already also a solution which offers pathologists a quite good level. Diagnostic pathology. That means that during the clinical routine procedures, the workflow of virtual microscopy runs quite well. But this is just in the moment not really the case. The time which is necessary to do this is a little bit too long. But nevertheless, if you look on other fields which are part of clinical pathology, especially, for instance, measurement of markers, that means support of diagnosis using virtual microscopy, that is a thing which runs quite well and gives a lot of development, especially in quality. The testing of the systems which you are using in virtual microscopy and in scanning microscopy and so on, you must test them, because there are several systems which are in cooperation, and the interfaces between these systems are sometimes open. They change, for instance. On the other side, you have processes which are running in the laboratory by humans. They are not yet done mostly by machines. So you have changes in your systems, and that's why you must test and test and test. I think this conference was very well organized and is also focused on the main critical points which are on the table now and are discussed here on the conference. On the other side, it is oriented in the future, and there are a lot of very fruitful discussions with the guys which develop the systems, and on the other side with the guys which use these systems.
Well, digital pathology, I think, fits in many different ways. Some already have fit in the past, some will come in the future. But at the present, we will see a lot of change already happening. So we see digital pathology in consultation, where we have, let's say, outside normal office hours, a problem where we need a specialist. Also, we see it now of use for teaching. We can see it in our routine practice for some special purposes, like measuring thickness of a tumor, or finding metastasis in a lymph node, or other special purposes like looking at different stains of the same tissue. So those are applications we actually already use now in daily practice. So you need to learn digital pathology by building expertise. I have myself the experience that when we try to validate this method that I looked at many glass slides and also at the same cases digital, I found that by far most of the cases I had the same finding. However, there was one specific case which I missed actually twice in the digital scan. It was a signet cell ring carcinoma of this large bowel. And I didn't miss it in the glass slide. And interestingly, my colleague, who had also no or little experience with digital pathology, experienced the same thing. Whereas two very experienced colleagues found this small lesion. And interestingly also, my trainees, who take way more time when they look at the slide, also didn't miss it. So this example tells me that for routine pathology, probably you can use digital pathology as well, but you have to go to a learning phase. It's a bit different. Now, in other situations where we use it already in a routine situation is when a patient comes with a very specific problem, like a brain tumor or a child with an aggressive tumor, let's say on the Saturday, which is not unusual, where you really need specialized pathology. And on call you have only one pathologist, probably not the one who is just specialized in the area that you need at that moment. And then the digital pathology is very helpful because the level of quality that the slide needs in those circumstances is not enormous. So we feel, actually all my pathologists, also those who don't like computers too much, were very happy with having this possibility, look at home at the laptop or even at the iPad at this slide, and felt very comfortable to talk to a colleague about cases. So those are two different sides of the coin. In the one where you need for your routine a lot of learning, and on the other hand in special areas where already immediately you can use the application. So I think for patients already at the moment, they now, I mean we are in a time that every patient has the right of an excellent diagnosis. And we all know that in medicine the diagnosis is key. If you have the right diagnosis, you can start with the proper treatment. And there are so many different treatments nowadays, for instance, especially in cancer, that the proper diagnosis is really crucial. We need therefore specialized pathologies for many different areas. And that means that consultation becomes more and more important. So the patient with a special tumor, a lymphoma or a brain tumor or a soft tissue cancer, they all need specialized pathology, which is not always in place in the pathology department of the hospital where the patient presents him or herself. So there, digital pathology is immediately benefiting patients already.
The value of pattern recognition in digital pathology is to add a new support tool to the diagnostic armoury for pathologists and to remove the obvious bias that we have, which is inherent in image analysis, in selecting out regions of interest and features that we want to characterise and classify. So this supports the pathologist in ensuring that we have robust data. The robustness of validation with regards to pattern recognition is really quite a novel and challenging area for us, in that we don't have a dedicated validation process as such. So we're trying to use sort of areas which can determine the accuracy of the pattern recognition we're using by looking at fitness curves and receiver operator characteristics in order to provide a knowledge and a degree of accuracy that people can actually relate to and ensure that they're going to generate, again, robust data in support of their tumour classification and tissue classification. Well, the use of pattern recognition is really in its infancy. So we're just starting out to understand how we can apply pattern recognition and what value this really adds to pathology as a whole. And I think certainly it's got potential for the future, that it alleviates the sort of laborious interactive processes that we use And this adds a lot of time to people's resource so they can dedicate their work in other areas rather than spending too much time on the sort of minor problems that we try to interactively draw within our samples. So this is an important area. And I think it will progress into the future where we get more confident with establishing these pattern recognition processes, and they will be applied across the board, especially in the drug discovery process where we're looking at target identification, we're trying to understand the mechanisms and the efficacy associated with those mechanisms, and also translate that into the clinical field. And potentially there will be value of pattern recognition in the future as far as clinical work is concerned. Well, certainly the use of pattern recognition in the future, certainly if we look at the use of digital pathology as a whole and slide scanners, that's been increasing at a sort of 12% growth rate per annum. And I think that pattern recognition will follow on from that as people implement and utilise image analysis more within the field, so that this will then be used as a tool for pathologists, and also that it will then be translated into the clinical field so that we can use it potentially as a companion algorithm to go alongside companion diagnostics and assessment kits that way. And also potentially to set up a pattern library so that people can then relate to those patterns and use that as a data mining tool to understand how tumours actually progress and how we can use them as predictive markers in the future. Digital pathology, this conference has covered a broad spectrum of interest, from the scanning through the image analysis, through application within both research and the clinical field, and also as the pattern recognition samples come through and classifications are utilised. So it's a very important step forward, and there's been a lot of discussions around standardization associated with digital pathology, and it's certainly given us some food for thought, and I think there's going to be a lot of collaborations coming out of this meeting, which will obviously bode well for the future of digital pathology.
Digital pathology has a lot of new tools and techniques that will greatly improve the patient experience. In my own research, which involves the end goals of my own research are to develop new magnetic resonance imaging means to survey prostate cancer in men recently diagnosed with that disease. That is a disease for which many men are overtreated, and the reason is that we don't have good preoperative in vivo ways to assess the total volume of disease in the patient. The work that we're doing involves a protocol where men who have biopsy-proven prostate cancer have extensive preoperative MRI imaging and undergo prostatectomy surgery. Those surgical specimens are processed in a very particular way so that we have full pathology data as ground truth against which to judge MR methods to try to survey the whole gland in the body before surgery. The reason why digital pathology is so important is that in the past we've had relatively limited ways to survey tissue sections, pathology sections for such studies. We could annotate where tumor is, but we end up, by doing that, having less powerful data than we could. So for example, when we annotate where tumor is, we loop in not only where is prostate cancer, but also other benign elements. And using digital pathology, we can subsample that data to very carefully detail what is exactly in the tissue. And that way we have a proven ground truth against which to measure MRI. The ultimate result of this work will be to have MRI scans by which patients can be scanned and the disease extent and aggressiveness can be determined before surgery. In fact, the goal is that many men, even though they have prostate cancer, have a very indolent form or a slow-growing, non-aggressive form where they really may not need surgery at all. So the question is how to find those men who do not need surgery versus those men who do. And that will require MR to pathology correlative studies, and the digital pathology offers really the missing link so far, which is the ability to very detailedly do the pathology ground truth work for these studies. I think in probably 10 years' time, the magnetic resonance imaging tools that I was describing will be clinically available. It will take that long because we are now finding those MR signatures that best correlate with the presence of prostate cancer in these correlative studies. Once we find those features, the MR features, clinical trials of such MR methods will be required to actually look then in men prospectively and ask how well did those methods hold up against their clinical outcomes. The Food and Drug Administration has the oversight of medical diagnostic testing as well as drugs and food. Historically, their regulation of the diagnostics industry has been relatively light. The reason why a microscope, for example, is exempt from FDA studies prior to releasing a new form of microscope onto the market is that it has been determined that they are substantially equivalent to microscopes that pre-existed in the marketplace prior to that act. Whole slide imagers have been deemed by the FDA to be different. Yes, they capture an image, and yes, that image is very similar in appearance to a microscope. However, the data that comprises that image is stored on servers and it's run through electronic means that are actually quite different than a photon passing through objectives. And for this reason, the FDA has declared that whole slide imagers are class 3 devices. What that means is that one must first demonstrate through a pre-market approval process that a whole slide scanner is safe and effective in a patient population. And those PMA or pre-market approval applications have not been filed yet to the satisfaction of FDA. And so where the market is going is that primarily manufacturers, but others, are preparing a pre-market approval study or studies for submission to FDA. And once the device has been shown to be safe and effective, that will very much open up the market in the US. Right now, FDA does not allow primary diagnosis using whole slide scanners, but once the first pre-market approval comes through, there will be many additional scanners and other devices similar that can be shown to be substantially equivalent through what's called a 510K process of demonstrating that substantial equivalency, and that's a much less onerous process. And so once that first PMA comes through, we'll see the American market open up for whole slide imaging. This has been a very good meeting. There is a high caliber of science and of new platforms and techniques that people in the industry are performing. There's a nice mix of academic and industrial speakers, and perhaps most importantly, when there is a commercial speaker, it's very declaratively demonstrated that they represent a commercial interest. So it really eliminates any undisclosed biases.
It has been an interesting experience for this hospital to turn digital, at least not completely, but at least to a large extent. It's been a long process where many things had to happen, like getting in all the IT stuff, getting the people motivated, making all the connections between the different building blocks of the system, and then trying to get used to actually using the system. So it has been a fairly painful process, but all the people were quite enthusiastic about it, and in the end we banged it down, and I think it works relatively well now. Many labs have been scanning slides occasionally for different purposes, but when you turn to real primary digital diagnostic pathology, then this is a fairly complicated process where you have to build a very good infrastructure. But once you get it done, it has a lot of potential advantages actually. Let me mention a few. First of all, it's much easier to consult your colleagues digitally. It's not like you have to run around with the slides and find somebody. You can just put up an images on the server with a message for, could you please look at this image? And that at the same time means that they don't have to do it on the spot when you come through that door, but they can do it at their leisure. This is a big advantage. It's also that all the multidisciplinary meetings can be done digitally. And also the preparation of the multidisciplinary meetings is much easier because normally all the slides are circulating, they're on desks of residents or pathologists, or they're just being put in the archive, and that means that many people are looking for slides all over the day. And that really takes a lot of time. We've estimated that about 1 FTE is on average busy looking for slides in the lab, so that's a lot of work. There is a few other advantages as well. None of the slides would be missing, so you would have them available really all the time. Sometimes slides get delivered to the wrong person, or I ask my colleague, could you cover my business for today, and I forgot to tell it the lab, and then the slides will be in the wrong spot. So that's another advantage too. A very important advantage could also be that the application of image analysis algorithms could be implemented into the workflow. That means you scan the slides immediately when they are produced in the lab, and then the image analysis algorithms can run in the background. And that means that the workflow becomes much better, because normally when you say, okay, this is a slide where I want some image analysis algorithms to work on, you have to initiate that process, and that takes time. Well, pathology is a quick business these days, so we cannot afford that, and this can be done in the background when you do really primary scanning. So these are just a few of the advantages that I could mention. To a large extent, current technologies is up to delivering an infrastructure that works for primary digital diagnostics. Not completely, I must confess. There is a lot of good building blocks available from different vendors, but still it's a challenge to put them together. It's not yet like some vendor has the complete solution that you can just carry into the lab, turn on the power, and it works. It's not like that. And that has to do with connections that have to be made between scanners and storages and lab information systems and speech recognition systems and test ordering systems and all these kind of things. So that's one, I think, very important issue, that connectivity is still an issue. It can be solved, but it's still fairly complicated. One other thing is that to work with the digital images in what we call a viewer, which is a program where you handle the images and scroll through it, magnify the images, zoom in, zoom out, and things like that. That is still a matter of concern. This is usually being done with just a regular computer mouse, and the ergonomics of that are quite poor, I think. And this is something, this is clearly an area that needs to be addressed, because otherwise people doing this primary diagnostics, working on images all the time, having to do this with a mouse will get RSI-like complaints. I'm quite sure about that. Deployment of digital pathology solutions is clearly influenced by regulations which are in place, at least in some countries. In the US they have really strict regulations. It has been recognized by the FDA as something that they need to improve in one of the highest classes of security classes, or whatever they call it. And that's an issue, and there is no FDA approval for primary diagnostic pathology yet. Some of the companies are actually working on this, so there is now consensus over a study that should be completed. And if the results are positive, then the FDA would approve digital pathology as a diagnostic technique. So maybe in about 1 year time that could be in place. In Europe it's a little different. We don't have an FDA, so there is no formal need for any approval before we actually apply this technology in clinical practice. But it is like the vendors like to have what we call a CE-IVD mark. That's like a quality mark for machines which are used for in vitro diagnostics. To get such a certification, and some of the scanners and some of the software and some of the images algorithms now have such an approval, and that's a good thing because that shows that at least the application of this technology is safe and reproducible. It's not so easy to predict what's going to happen over the next 5 years. We started doing this 6 years ago, and it didn't go as fast as I had predicted 6 years ago, so I have to be a little bit modest. But I see that digital pathology is pretty much on the verge of a breakthrough. There's so much interest, no longer just in academic hospitals, but also in a lot of regional hospitals. So I think in 1 or 2 years' time, we will see more and more labs emerging that do some form of digital pathology. So I would dare to predict again that in 5 years' time, this will be a fairly established piece of technology, at least in the Western world. And I'm not going to say that everything will be fully digital. That will take much longer than 5 years. But over the next 5 years, I really think we see a breakthrough in clinical practice of this technology. The program of the Digital Pathology Conferences covers a wide range of different topics which are of interest to the various people attending this meeting. There are many pathologists around here, but also some technical people. And I think altogether it provides a nice overview of what's happening in different areas. And there is a lot of enthusiasm about the application of these techniques. There's a lot of beliefs around here, and I think they're enjoying the meeting.
Sure. Digital pathology in 2014, having watched this over the past 15 years, I think is really at a tipping point in terms of adoption. I think that the market worldwide is expanding due to the need for efficiencies and workflow given changes in healthcare. So I think these enabling technologies will help all of us deliver better care more efficiently. Digital pathology in the next 5 to 10 years, I think, is as more widely adopted and in common use and practice, is a very attainable goal, and I think that that's the trajectory we're on right now. I think 5 to 10 years is a very conservative time frame for more wider adoption of use as an enabling technology, giving us more tools in our toolbox to provide better care and improved outcomes. I've always considered digital pathology to be an enabling technology that will be used as an adjunctive tool to conventional light microscopy techniques and histopathology techniques that pathologists worldwide have done for 150 years. But it will give us another set of tools in our toolbox to use in terms of improved diagnosis, better outcomes, and overall improved patient care. So I don't think it will be, some people have called it a disruptive technology. I think it should be called an enabling technology, and it will enable us to do more. So the Food and Drug Administration in the United States is charged with protecting the public health safety, and they are charged with regulating medical devices to ensure that patients are safe. And under that auspice, diagnostic companies, medical device manufacturers have to subscribe to a level of classification for their devices, that those devices have been validated and are safe for clinical use. There has been some debate publicly since about 2008 at a panel convened by the FDA looking at the use of whole slide imaging for primary diagnosis, and that's what most people are referring to when they regard the FDA and whole slide imaging. When will they regard the device as safe enough to make a primary H&E diagnosis? The FDA already has cleared a number of algorithms for therapeutic diagnostic testing, such as in breast markers for ER, PR, and HER2. And the question now has come back, is it safe to use for primary H&E diagnosis? And that's what's being discussed and debated now. Fortunately, we have a growing body of literature and experience to support that, in fact, it is safe for clinical use, and more discussion occurring around the use for primary diagnosis. The bar has been set pretty high by the FDA to ensure that all of us are doing our job for patient safety, and I think we're all involved in having that discussion. The CE mark in Europe has been gained by a number of device manufacturers and determined safe for clinical use. And I suspect we will get there soon with regards to the FDA. The panel was really exciting. It was very well attended. It was very informal. I had no scheduled questions for the panelists this afternoon. We actually took questions, open questions from the attendees. And the questions were very high level, very thoughtful, and with really good participation by the panelists. So I think it provided some clarification for those attending in terms of overcoming barriers in adoption of digital pathology. We were very blessed and fortunate to have 4 panelists this afternoon with probably about 6 decades worth of experience implementing digital pathology solutions in a wide variety of settings. And I think the attendings were able to leverage some of that experience and knowledge going forward in their own institutions and their own practices. I think for someone who attends a lot of meetings and a lot of informatics meetings and a lot of imaging and digital pathology associated meetings, I found the scientific content at this meeting to be extremely high, and I certainly appreciate the strong level of industry support for this meeting and the level of discussion and dialogue that's taken place at this meeting. One of the best of the year, certainly.
Yes, certainly. Digital pathology standardization is very, very important because our specialty pathology is changing a lot in the way that it's becoming more and more automated procedures that we didn't have before. And in order all this automation to happen fluently and to be able to interconnect different pathology departments between them, the only possibility is using standards that are already available. These IT or medical informatics standards were created about 5 and 3 years ago, so they are already available and we should take advantage of them. Why are they important? Because many pathology departments are defining the workflow in a very different way. So the first thing we should do is to define the best workflow, the best turnaround times to save time, to improve the quality of our diagnosis. That's important if we really make a standard business process. That's the best part. But also there is some, let's say, technological standardization, for instance, in the image. Right now, we have many file formats for the scanners, for the digital slide scanners, and the way to interact, to make an efficient interoperability between the LIS, the Laboratory Information System, the PACS, which is the place where you're going to save your images, and the viewer, which is the software that will show your images. The only possibilities is using these standards. Essentially, there are 3 standards we must know about, which are DICOM for image, which has HL7 for exchanging data, and which is SNOMED-CT, just to have this semantic interoperability, that my diagnosis in Spanish should mean the same diagnosis in English. That can be achieved with these standards. They can do a certain approach to get for the standards to be able to be implemented in their systems. I'm not saying that every single scanner vendor has to use the same file format. I'm saying that they will be able to connect, let's say, to integrate their images in a global network where all pathologists, let's say, all over the world will be able to see their images because they are able to send it and to communicate that images in a standard platform. So it's okay if you locally work with a proprietary format that can be very efficient, but we think of pathology as a global network of interconnected medical professionals and scientists. We need these imaging standards. In 5 years' time, we will be able to achieve many of the expectations we have in IT standards, let's say. Probably we will have a way to exchange images. DICOM images will be implemented in 5 years' time in many. Probably we will have some difficulties with some LIS interoperability connections between systems, because right now there is a big fragmentation in the market, mainly with the laboratory information systems. So I would say that the answer is yes, but probably not with all LIS vendors. But I think the major ones will take care of that. So that's why we want LIS vendors to come to these meetings, and also to be aware that we need also their help for this to happen in 5 years' time. Well, I think my pathology department in 5 years' time will suffer a lot of changes, good changes, essentially. I mean, for instance, right now the processes and the workflow is based on a glass slide, and it's based on what we call a push process, in which the pathologist receives the work that he has to do. This is going to change, because probably in the near future, in 5 years' time, we will work in a pull mode, in which the pathologist will go to the system and will collect the cases that he wants to read or process. So for the process, the diagnosis process, it will be very important, because that will make the possibility that pathologists can concentrate it on those cases where his expertise is broader. He feels more confident with diagnose those cases. So he will have the possibility to choose the cases. One possibility that we have now, because right now there is no personalized way of working. So it will not only be the personalized way of treating patients, it will also be the personalized way of working on diagnosis. That's something I cannot do with glass slide. In fact, in this conference, what I like most is that you have at the same time people from the companies giving you their approach, giving you their expertise, and please remember this is a very new field, and most companies are the ones who have much more experience than many of the pathologists. That's why in this conference, if I hear about a company speaking about image analysis, probably they know much more than my own experience, that maybe 20 or 100 cases, but they had the opportunity to review thousands of cases. That's why in this case it's very important having this opportunity of networking between the scientists, pathologists, and of course companies. Image analysis was covered very thoroughly in this conference, and this is a very important topic. For instance, to remember that image analysis is not only about biomarkers, can be considered also in hematoxylin, and I'm glad to see that some companies are also considering that image analysis plays a very important role also in conventional stainings like hematoxylin. That's one of the main issues that I found very interesting in this conference.
Several years ago, we couldn't make any 3D imaging of whole slide, but because of the improvement of whole slide imaging scanner, the technology which we can use for 3D imaging, and also software. We have some software available we can use for 3D reconstruction, and then at the same time we developing our own image analysis 3D image construction software to encourage the industry. So the main challenge of 3D imaging is file size, and because one image of whole slide is like 10 gigabyte, then we are using 100 or like 1,000 of whole slide imaging put together. So the file size is so huge, like 1 terabyte or like 100 terabyte sometime. And then also how to reconstruct the image, like there's some missing information we have. How to reconstruct accurately is the main key. We have several research conducting with clinician and the other physician, but the biggest the contribution in medical area is lung adenocarcinoma. So lung adenocarcinoma, like we found new discovery on lung adenocarcinoma. So then after our discovery, we changing the classification of lung adenocarcinoma, and then also changing the treatment, the patient, because of our finding. So improving the patient care, but my position is more helping the physician. Okay. The physician to give opportunity to physician to make a diagnosis or make a decision right way. To a patient. So that's why like we try to give accurate data for physicians. Like myself is more engineer, like between medical area and the engineering. So that's why we want to give the accurate information to physician to make a good diagnosis. Because the pathology, the color of pathology is involving so many criteria, like so many things, like staining, and then also the thickness, and there are many areas. So that's why like, we want to find what's causing the problem of color. It's really difficult. Like scanner producing different color, and then each monitor producing different color, and then also the staining different, and then software producing totally different color too. So that's why we want to identify what's causing the color issue. So then also the standardize. That's why we've been working with many institutions and many industry people to have a standardized method of scanner first and the entire digital pathology. It depends how much we want to do. So right now, like ourselves, we're doing like color standardization using the calibration slide we have developed, and then so we demonstrate other industry people and the institution. And then actually last month we had a big conference working with color industry, like CIC, Color International CIC organization, yes. And then we had a digital pathology conference together because everyone started thinking color is very important aspect in pathology. Yeah, and I really like this conference. I'm happy to participate this time, and then because I can meet many different people from industry and many researchers, and also I've been in this area for many years. I could meet many people I haven't seen each other for a while, and then the topic was changing. In the beginning, like several years ago, like 10 years ago, we were talking about more scanner. So, but this time, not many people talking about the scanner itself. It's more like software and how to standardize. And then I see some like improvement, and then the people are changing, they're adapting digital pathology. So actually, it's really, I'm happy to see the change. Yeah.
I think digital pathology over the next 5 years is only going to grow, to be honest, both in the research sector and massively in the clinical sector as well. I think the enthusiasm and the business of this meeting really shows that everyone's keen, and it's going to grow, no doubt. Yep. So Zeiss's digital pathology solution really is the AxiaScan Z1, which is our brand new high throughput, high resolution slide imaging system. So the most flexible system with fluorescence and bright field lends itself to the most demanding research and clinical requirements. Our experience here has been very, very positive actually. It's been far busier than any of us really thought it would be. Engaging both with the delegates but also meeting the other companies and interacting with those guys as well has been really, really positive. I'm very pleased.
Well, I think from all of the industry's perspective, I think we see that there is a major opportunity here for digital pathology to be integrated into clinical pathways. There is no doubt about that. And I think there are benefits there for the patients, for the clinicians, and also for the industry itself. But there's an awful lot of things we've heard from the speakers here about the issues that need to be addressed. It's not a priority, there isn't the funding, there aren't the guidelines, and there are a number of things I think that industry could do to try and facilitate this, working with the NHS, the Department of Health, to also look at this, how do we bring this in, also developing of guidelines, because until we have that sort of framework, I don't believe that digital pathology will progress as fast as it should do, as we've already seen with radiology has already been adopted. So I think there's a lot to be done, and I think industry needs to get together and start talking about this, and perhaps it would be good to have an industry group that actually puts together an approach that will help develop the market faster for the benefit of the patients, the clinicians, and ultimately ourselves. I think I see standardization as being something that we have to look at as an industry, because I think that's going to be one of the part of the enablers. Once we have things like the guidelines in place, once we have sort of like that sort of framework in place, you have to have the enablers that help the NHS develop their clinical pathways by having those standardizations. So there is the interchange available and possible between the different systems.
Historically, histology has always been a manual process, and what Roche has to offer is automation of the histology processes from staining the slide through to viewing the slide for reporting purposes. Our digital pathology system is used for that reporting process, but is integrated into the histology lab as a whole using our other products such as Vantage and our staining system. Digital pathology receives information from the backbone of the automation of the system and produces a case to which images are attached. So the pathologist is given a logon, and when the pathologist logs onto the system, what he sees or what she sees are a series of images of slides they historically have seen down a microscope. The advantage to the pathologist is that the images can be viewed multiply, so he can see 4 images from the same case. He can see more information on any one image, and he is not tied to a microscope. He can view those images from any workstation anywhere on the Trust network. The other advantage is with images you can share information. Telepathology is something that the system offers, and it offers the ability for that pathologist to view his case from anywhere on the network, or assign that case to any other pathologist within his organisation, or indeed share a case with multiple pathologists via WebEx connections throughout the internet. So the versatility digital pathology offers is a real advantage in reporting pathological cases.
I think the Digital Pathology Congress has been a very well organised and engaging meeting, and I'd also like to give a thank you to Global Engage for having Roche along. I think there's been a lot of common trends and a lot of common themes from the vendors, pathologists, clinicians alike, in and around infrastructure and where digital pathology is going to go in the future. I appear to think there's a lot of stumbling blocks at the moment, but hopefully if we all engage and work together, we'll all hit the same objective. At the Digital Pathology Congress, yeah, there's been a great engagement from a lot of the attendees. You know, I think there's over 260 delegates that have been represented at the conference, and I do believe that there's been a lot of good positive feedback regarding digital pathology and how we should look to move things going forward.
Well, Pathology Diagnostics Limited is an independent GCLP accredited histopathology research organisation based in Cambridge, UK. We're one of the leading histopathology clinical trials organisations working with a variety of international pharmaceutical and biotech companies based globally, and multiple investigator sites based in Europe and other countries around the world. Our expertise is in providing tissue laboratory and diagnostic services, and we have a wealth of expertise in digital pathology, from whole slide scanning, slide hosting, and image analysis of biomarkers in tissue samples from patients in clinical trials. Well, we're a quality accredited organisation. We're GCLP accredited and we work to GCP guidelines. Quality is absolutely paramount within our organisation, and we validate all steps of digital image analysis, from validation of scanners to slides and algorithms. I think the take-home message from the image analysis stream in this conference is that validation of image analysis platforms is absolutely vital. We still cannot get away from having trained scientists, and more importantly pathologists, providing the ground truth for what biomarker assessments should be, and from which we can actually validate the algorithms that we use in the clinical setting. I think there's a lot of development and scope for evolution of the image analysis platforms. There's been a lot of interest and a lot of discussion about using computer vision and machine learning techniques to develop those image analysis platforms so they can learn and adapt to all the variability of human tissue samples and the variability of the way in which the samples are processed. So there is huge hope and huge opportunities for evolution using machine learning techniques to evolve to the next generation of image analysis platforms, but that will take time, probably another 10 years or so, and we wait with great excitement to see what that means for research and development, but also there's a lot of interest from pathologists about how that will benefit primary diagnosis and cut out some of the bottlenecks in that arena. So the Digital Pathology Conference was a very useful and interesting event for both for myself and for our organisation. I was chairing the session on pathology informatics and image analysis, and there were a selection of very useful talks from academia, healthcare and industry discussing latest developments in those areas. The conference was of great value because of the wide range of delegates from all three different sectors, and the opportunity to have very useful and informative debates around the areas of informatics and image analysis. The conference has been very useful for our organisation because it's allowed us to see how developments have been progressing in hardware and software provision for our particular sector, and to network with other people within our sector who are putting digital pathology to use in research and development in the pharmaceutical industry.
So Hamamatsu provide the Nanozuma slide scanner range, so we provide everything from a one slide single scanner all the way up to a large batch scanner, 320 slide scanner called the Nanozuma XR. So we provide the whole solution. So Hamamatsu are really excited about digital pathology moving forward, and I suppose we see, you'll be talking about digital pathology now, but in the future it'll just be pathology. It'll be what we expect everything to be. No, I think there will be some hurdles to come across before that we get to the final stage, and where it just becomes the routine for everything. I think everyone will have to work together to make that happen, but I think that there's a demand from the community, the pathology community, to see that happen. I think we've seen that at the conference this week. So it's been a really excellent congress, we've really enjoyed it. What's been a real benefit compared to other pathology congresses that we've attended is that the delegates that have been here have been all very interested and wanted to know about digital pathology. So it's been really excellent speaking to those people and their enthusiasm for digital pathology.
Okay, thank you very much for talking to me. Would you like to tell us a little bit about Leica Biosystems solution for digital pathology?
So Leica Biosystems are a group of companies that have come together primarily through acquisitions, as is the Danaher Way, them being our parent company. And our digital pathology solution really comes from Aperio, who are a Californian-based company who really started the digital pathology market. As a result, we have an awful lot of installations globally. We actually are the leaders for numbers of placements in the market, right the way from education up through research, pharmaceutical, and now into the clinical space in some regions as well, both for diagnostic and non-diagnostic procedures. And that really goes from everything from the image acquisition and the scanner side of things to enterprise level software solutions for networking in a multi-site hub and spoke environment, and all the way through then to automated image analysis. So when people talk a lot about standardization in digital pathology, and it's a very valid and very hot topic right now, but you also have to kind of take the garbage in, garbage out approach to it, and digital pathology, or reviewing the slide, is that last step in the anatomical pathology process. So really, when we talk about standardization, we need to look at the preceding steps in that full process if we want to have true standardization. And that goes right the way through tissue preparation, your tissue staining, your section thickness when you're using microtomes, and all of these impact on the overall finished slide. And then that's the input into your scanner, and that leads to your digital pathology. So really, Leica Biosystems are uniquely placed in that we have a huge understanding of the full process of anatomical pathology, so are really uniquely placed to handle that full standardization right the way through the process, and looking at a digital environment where sample tracking and labeling and appropriate barcoding are becoming more and more pertinent, in particular when you're working with multi-site organizations where slides are being sent out to people remotely. So the Digital Pathology Congress for us was a really successful meeting. The quality of talks was absolutely excellent, with some very key opinion leaders and very good speakers. The event actually left plenty of time for networking, for the socializing element that's so essential to these meetings, and just the logistics around it were excellent. A great team to work with as well from an organization perspective, and one that will definitely come back to next year.